When we think of artificial intelligence, our attention is naturally drawn to the names that dominate the headlines. We see the logos, we use the chatbots, we marvel at the image generators that seem to create art from thin air. This has led to a common belief that the future of AI is being forged and controlled by just a handful of well-known companies. But this perception, while understandable, is fundamentally incomplete. The reality is far more complex. True power in the AI ecosystem is layered, much like an iceberg. What we see on the surface are the applications, the visible tip. But the vast majority of the mass, the structural foundation that dictates direction and speed, sits hidden from view. The real control is located deep beneath the surface. If you only look at these visible brands, you're missing the bigger picture. You miss where the true points of leverage actually live. And in the world of technology and economics, leverage is what determines power. It's the ability to influence an entire system by controlling a critical, underlying component. So when people talk about AI, they usually mention companies like OpenAI, Google, or Microsoft. These are the architects of the applications we interact with. They represent the most visible, accessible layer of the AI stack. But they are only one layer. The true control of AI is structured across multiple interdependent layers of infrastructure. Think of it like a modern city. You might notice the iconic skyscrapers, but their existence depends entirely on the unseen power grid, the water mains, and the transportation networks below. Without that foundational infrastructure, the skyline could not exist. In AI, each of these hidden layers holds a different and crucial form of leverage. The first and most fundamental layer is compute. Artificial intelligence, especially at the frontier, requires an almost unimaginable amount of computational power. Training these advanced models is not a simple or inexpensive task. It requires highly specialized hardware, fleets of thousands of graphics processing units, or GPUs, running in concert for weeks or months at a time. This hardware is the bedrock upon which everything else is built. The first layer of leverage is compute. This isn't the general-purpose processing found in most computers. AI relies on a specialized form of computational power, delivered by graphics processing units, or GPUs. While CPUs handle tasks sequentially, GPUs excel at performing millions of parallel calculations at once, the exact kind of mathematics required to train and run large models. And that hardware is largely produced by one company, NVIDIA. Without this specialized compute, there is no model. Without the hardware, there is no scale. Compute is the absolute foundation. And foundations rarely get headlines, but they quietly collect immense value. Layer 2 is cloud infrastructure. Even if you build the world's most powerful chips, they are useless in isolation. You need the global nervous system to connect them. Vast, distributed systems of data centers, storage, and high-speed networking. This is the domain of the hyperscalers, companies like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. They have spent decades and hundreds of billions of dollars laying hundreds of thousands of miles of fiber optic cable across ocean floors and building server farms the size of small cities. They don't just build AI, they host it, scale it, and provide the rails to monetize it. Cloud infrastructure is leverage because it controls distribution. And in the digital world, distribution determines who can access the power of AI. Layer 3 is model ownership. This is where the intelligence itself is forged. Companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google's DeepMind operate here. They design the complex architectures and push research forward. But their primary source of leverage comes from the costly and time-consuming process of training. Using the first two layers, they feed these architectures colossal amounts of data for weeks or months, creating a proprietary, pre-trained foundation model. This finished asset, capable of inference, becomes a powerful point of control in the ecosystem. So far, we have compute, cloud infrastructure, and the models themselves. But the stack doesn't end there. But even this layer depends on the layers beneath it. No compute, no cloud, no scaling. Model builders are powerful, but they are not independent. They are interconnected. Layer 4 is capital. Artificial intelligence development requires billions in investment. Training costs. Layer 5 is regulation. Governments around the world are beginning to recognize AI as strategic infrastructure. Policy determines access. Export controls determine distribution. National security frameworks determine collaboration. Control over regulation becomes control over speed. And speed matters in technological revolutions. So when someone asks, who controls AI? The real answer is layered. Compute providers, cloud operators, model builders, capital allocators, regulators. Control is not centralized, it is distributed, but leverage concentrates where infrastructure sits. This pattern of power, where the visible surface distracts from the structural core, is not new. We have seen this play out before, time and time again. Consider the railroad revolution. It wasn't truly controlled by the myriad of train companies operating the locomotives. It was controlled by those who owned the rails themselves. Owning the physical tracks meant controlling the flow of commerce, dictating the growth of towns, and holding leverage over every industry that relied on them. The real lasting power wasn't in the visible train cars, but in the unglamorous network of steel they ran upon. The same was true for the internet boom. It wasn't ultimately controlled by the thousands of flashy websites that captured the public's imagination. It was controlled by the infrastructure providers. The companies laying fiber optic cables across oceans, building the massive anonymous data centers, and engineering the core routers. They owned the digital highways. History shows a clear and repeating pattern. The applications on the surface are designed to capture our attention. But the infrastructure underneath is designed to capture the value. This happens because building infrastructure is immensely capital intensive, creating high barriers to entry that naturally lead to consolidation. And this is the hidden truth about artificial intelligence. Most people, understandably, focus on what they can see and interact with. The chatbot, the image generator, the application's interface. But the real power, the structural control, flows deep beneath the surface. It flows through the specialized compute hardware, through the hyperscale cloud platforms, through the immense capital required for development, and increasingly through the frameworks of regulation. These are the layers that truly matter. If you want to understand wealth in the AI era, you must understand structure, not hype, not headlines, structure. Because structure determines who captures long-term value. Artificial intelligence is not just a technological revolution. It is a redistribution of leverage. And those who understand leverage early position themselves differently. The question is not, which AI app should I use? The deeper question is, where does power accumulate in this system? Because wealth always accumulates where leverage compounds. AI is not controlled by one company. It is controlled by layers of infrastructure. And infrastructure is rarely loud, but it is always powerful. If you want to think about AI intelligently, think in layers, think in leverage, think in systems. Because in every technological revolution, the visible players get attention, but the structural players build empires.